Howdy gamers, and it just doesn't feel like October. I'm not in the Halloween spirit, which blows. I've tried wearing a long sleeve shirt, putting up decorations, I even egged 4 different houses including my own, but nothing seems to be doing it. The only thing left I can think of is playing the scariest game I can imagine. Castlevania for the NES. I do not have a good imagination. Castlevania is such an interesting series to me. There used to be a new release in the franchise almost every single year, sometimes even 2 in a year, and then there just hasn't been a new game in almost a decade. Even then, it was a game developed by Mercury Steam. If you want to talk last Castlevania game made by Konami, that would be over a decade ago in 2008. It would be like if we suddenly stopped getting arcade archive games on the Switch. There's more than 7 times the amount of arcade archive games than Virtual Boy games ever released. However, that is being a bit unfair to Konami. They did release a Castlevania slot machine back in 2016, which is now the sole reason I'm looking forward to turning 18. I don't want to be able to vote, die for oil, or be 3 years away from renting a car. I want to gamble my life savings away. I mean, it's not like I'm making good use of it as is. For Christ's sake, I own more than 15% of the North American Wii U library, and I've played like 2 of the games. Enough about the Wii U though, because even with the slot machine, I have been exaggerating a bit about Castlevania's absence. Sure, there hasn't been a new game since Ebola, but in 2019, to celebrate Konami's 50th anniversary, they decided to make games for once. Not real games, mind you, but collections, one of which being the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. It came with 8 games, excluding a lot of the fan favorites, and instead gave us stuff like the Game Boy games. Not the remakes of the Game Boy games that are impossible to play nowadays and are objectively better, mind you, but the original version. Kid Dracula did get localized for the first time ever, so at least that's cool. And there's a neat bonus book in it that goes over the history of the series, but what I'm really here to talk about is the Castlevania game with Dracula in it. Yeah, that one. For being an NES game and the first one in its series, Castlevania freaking gets so much right. The game starts off strong with an opening cutscene of Simon Belmont walking up to the gates of Dracula's castle, showing you where you're going to be spending your time in this game, and you can even see where the final boss battle takes place. If you know anything about me, it's that I love leaving bottles of milk on people's porches so they think there's a milkman, and also that I love when games show you places in advance, off in the background. It creates a strong feeling of the game actually being connected when you see stuff like this. It isn't even the only time in the game where we can actually see this landmark, and the game continues the feeling of connectivity with a lot of the levels leading into one another, but they don't always do it, which was disappointing. Another thing that the opening cutscene does well is setting up the atmosphere for the game. It's an almost pitch black night as a dark cloud moves over the moon, and in front of Simon, we see the inky silhouette of Dracula's castle. This isn't Bubble Bobble. This is Castlevania. You know the game's scary because not only does it have Big Cat, it even has Red Skeleton. Anyways, I should probably stop over-analyzing a 5-second video game cutscene. Sure, it's longer than the average Smash fan's shower, but it's not the most mind-blowing thing. Albeit, to say one last thing, the opening jingle, I guess you could call it, sounds amazing. Similarly to the rest of the soundtrack, not only is it amazing, but it has a spooky feel to it while also sounding really intense, like you're determined to kill Dracula. Overall, this is probably one of the best NES soundtracks out there, which makes sense considering this game came out 3 years into its life. By then, people understood the console more, allowing for better music and just games as a whole. Before, a lot of NES games were cryptic with how to play. However, Castlevania's opening sequence does a great job. You start off in a courtyard of sorts with no enemies around, so there's no pressure. So you'll probably try using one of the 2 hole buttons on your controller, which, oh hey, that one looks like an attack. After learning that, the player will probably try to hit the flame, since it greatly stands out from the background considering it's the only thing other than the player moving and the color palette is unique. After being hit, it drops a heart, but the second one drops some sort of upgrade that seemingly makes the whip longer. Then the final fire drops the dagger, which, in all fairness, you would probably never know how to use without the manual, but excluding that, the game does a great job at teaching its mechanics quickly and better than most NES games. Within less than 30 seconds, it's taught you how to attack, the different drops, to hit flames to get said drops, and that your whip can be upgraded. Technically, it doesn't show all the variety of drops since there's a really pointless money bag you can get, which is just from the classic era of games where beating it wasn't enough, you also had to get the high score. Like, Jesus Christ, how much validation do you need to not only try to get a high score in an NES game with an ending, but then brag about it? Thankfully, unlike the money, the hearts are useful and are used to power your weapons. There is stuff like the watch, boomerang, and aforementioned dagger, which can all be dropped. I'd say they all serve their own use except for the dagger, which is outshined by the boomerang, making it objectively useless. Other than that though, they're all fun to use successfully to traverse a level. Not to mention, the drops for them are somewhat randomized, so each playthrough will be kind of different. My only problem with them is that it's easy to accidentally get rid of a weapon for one you might not want at that moment. A swap button would have been so nice so that you don't replace weapons by accident. That's not my only critique about the game either. I'd say I've been pretty positive overall, but that's because I haven't talked about the stairs yet. In the game's defense, stairs were first made in 2500 BC, so they're a pretty recent invention, quite easy to mess up since they're so new, but they're still annoying. If you've never played the game, I probably seem crazy, but I think anyone who's played Castlevania would agree with me that the stairs being awful are one of the few first principles. Instead of acting like a slant in a Mario game or just the ground but slightly different, the stairs act as their own entity, meaning you have to walk onto them holding up or you'll not go up them, which sometimes can lead to annoying circumstances. That also means you can't jump onto them or off of them, which leads me to believe that the stairs in this game weren't made for climbing, they were made to lure you into a false sense of security. More evidence of this comes from the fact that if you're at the bottom of a stairs and want to attack with a weapon, you can't. On paper, there doesn't seem to be an issue. It sounds simple enough, pretty sure I've done harder things.
I'm trying to open my Call of Duty Black Ops for the Wii.
The problem is, if you press up at the base of the stairs, you'll just climb up them, so it's impossible and can lead to you doing what you don't want to do. Realistically though, the stairs are part of a much bigger problem with Castlevania for the NES, being the platforming. The jumping in this game just doesn't feel right. We as humans are prone to mistakes, just look at any one of Nintendo's Wii U ads, but the jumping doesn't seem to take that into account. A good way to describe it would basically be committed momentum. No matter what you do, you can't change the jump at all. No moving around in the air or changing how far you jump. You're always locked into a specific motion. There are some gaps where it works, but others feel like they weren't made for continuous momentum. It also just makes jumping off of something feel weird, almost like your character has too much weight to him. I really don't want to spend too much time on just the jump, so to put it simply, there's a reason almost every other platformer doesn't do this. Similarly, there's a reason almost every other platformer doesn't have this extreme of knockback. There are points in the game where you don't even have to worry about how much damage an enemy will do, but instead the knockback they'll do, which isn't exactly ideal. It can and will lead to so many deaths that just end up feeling unfair because look how much health I have and oops, now I'm dead. It's so freaking extreme. I guess I'm fine with the idea of knockback and platformers, but it's too much and actively makes the game less enjoyable at times. Especially considering that some of the enemy placement is unfair. Some levels have enemies that appear out of nowhere, and coupled with the knockback can lead to some unfair deaths. It is made more bearable by the fact that if you get a game over, you don't have to restart all the way back to the beginning of the game, but dying to something that didn't feel like it was your fault never feels fun. However, I'll still commend the game for not resetting itself upon a game over. A lot of NES games did this at the time, which is also why I separate NES games from the rest of my collection. Not to mention there are temporary checkpoints in case you do die. Each death doesn't reset you to the start of a level, only a game over does. Some people prefer permanent checkpoints, and while I do understand that, I don't think the game is necessarily hard enough to warrant those compared to something like Celeste. Not to mention, it's really rewarding to struggle with part of a level and then learn through playing it the most effective way to beat it, allowing you to blaze through so you can die at the boss fight. It gives a great sense of progression in the levels, but I could see the argument that it just artificially increases difficulty in playtime. To some people, it might be discouraging to get a game over at a boss fight and then have to crawl all the way back there after getting a game over. If you're wondering how I feel about the boss fights I just mentioned, they're really nothing special. I do like how each one at least looks and plays somewhat differently. They're all based on classic horror icons like a larger than average bat, white guys, and Frankenstein and his monkey Charlie. But unfortunately, the designs are the coolest part of them. A lot can be beaten just by spamming the whip and whatever weapon you have, leaving little room for strategy, and even for the ones that are harder to cheese, they aren't too interesting of a fight. Every boss just has one attack that they do, which is really lame, but I guess not too surprising for an NES game. The bosses in Cuphead are amazing because they have different phases, telegraph attacks, and have different moves they do in those phases, but as previously mentioned, these have one singular attack, which is lame. That doesn't even make them easy. While they can all be cheated in the first few are a cakewalk, some are actually difficult, but not in a good way. With stuff like Igor and Frankenstein, it feels more unfair than fun. Nothing is all that well telegraphed and it becomes a bullet hell with really stiff movement. To clarify, by stiff movement, I'm more so referring to the jumping. The movement speed is good, especially compared to something like Castlevania The Adventure for the Game Boy. Technically, the whip feels stiff to use, but that's more intentional. And I do get that just because something is intentional doesn't make it good by any means. I am in fact familiar with the N64 controller, but I love the way the whip works. There's a slight delay between hitting the button and the whip extending, which on paper sounds bad, but this isn't paper, it's a video game, so it's great. The whip is decently long, so you don't have to worry about timing it wrong or getting too close and then the whip taking too long to hit them. The delay adds a layer of strategy, which by the time you beat the first level becomes second nature, and you don't even think about it anymore. Plus, there are whip upgrades to make it even longer and stronger, so you don't have to worry. The whip upgrades drop the same as all the other drops in the game, except for the health drops. Personally, I'm surprised I've gone this long without mentioning the health drops, considering how much I think they're poorly done. Instead of making it so when you kill an enemy there's a chance that you might get a health power-up, the player has to hit random walls with the whip to find food. Maybe if there was something that indicated where to hit, I'd be okay with it, but instead it just becomes a game of, oh, I'm at low health, let me just hit all the walls around me. I'm assuming that they want to add a sense of exploration with this, but it doesn't feel like exploring, it's just boring. These levels all look so similar to each other that I don't feel the urge to do anything like that. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. You can definitely tell the differences between levels, but that's mainly thanks to the color of the background. While each level sort of has its own visual identity, they do play exactly like the last, considering the game isn't really introducing new gameplay mechanics. However, the game does get credit for at least introducing new enemies each level. Even excluding boss fights, they all introduce at least one new monster to fight that are all decently different from one another. And one last thing, the whole reason why I went on the preamble in the beginning about the Castlevania Anniversary Collection is not only because I like wasting people's time, but also because I feel like it's necessary to say that's the version of the game I played. Usually, I don't care enough to specify because really any version of a game is fine as long as it's not the Smash Bros. Brawl Masterpiece demo version of said game. Unfortunately, with Castlevania on the NES, at least in the collection, I feel the need to mention that it crashed quite a bit for me. Not the collection itself, but the actual game Castlevania. This isn't just a Switch issue either. Apparently M2, the people behind the collection, used the Revision 0 version of the game. I won't pretend to know about what that means, besides it has a glitch that commonly happens on the final boss, but can happen elsewhere, where the game crashes. Luckily, it's not too big of an issue since the game has save states, so as long as you're saving at the beginning of each level, you should be fine, but it still shouldn't be a problem, especially since from what I can tell, all they had to do was fix it was use the right ROM. I'm not too happy with the save state system either. There's only a single save slot, which just seems stupid that there's not more. There was also no rewind feature whatsoever. Don't get me wrong, I would never use it because not using the rewind feature makes me morally superior, but it would have been nice anyways. As a joke. Finally, if you are wondering, the other games in the collection work fine emulation-wise. The only reason I even bring all this up in a review of Castlevania for the NES
is because this collection is the most accessible way to play the game anyways. Plus, it's a pretty good deal all things considered.
Castlevania is a pretty charming NES game. Like most, it doesn't have some complex plot. Here it just boils down to Selman Belmont trying to, as the 45th President of the United States once said, stop the count, but it makes up for the simple plot with its gameplay. It does have some of the NES era quirks like occasional unfair enemy placement, but it is better than most. That's why to give the game a score out of 100, I'd give it an 84 out of 100. And to give this game an award, I'd give it the Spookiest NES Game Award. You might think that because this is the spookiest NES game I've ever played, I'm now in the Halloween spirit, but unfortunately not yet. Don't worry though, my friend mailed me in a package the scariest NES game ever, so I'm gonna take a look at that and— oh god, shapes!